Roughly 40 million people live in poverty in the USA. Can you imagine living under $24,000 a year for a family of 4? If you can't, why can't you? Surely media should help. This week, why are mainstream media so poor at covering poverty, and what one project is doing to tell those important stories. Hard work, not enough money coming in, precarious housing, food that's scarce. Poverty is a persistent factor of American life, but reporting on it is surprisingly tricky, especially in a media culture that has a lot of time for celebrities and clickbait, but not a whole lot of interest in or even connection to the reality that millions of Americans live. In 2012, Barbara Ehrenreich, author of the best-selling book Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America, founded something called the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. The mission? To tell real stories in creative, affecting, sometimes jarring ways. Another, to help journalists who face economic hardship themselves do this work. What's it producing? And is anything shifting about the class character of journalism and journalists in the U.S.? Here to tell us and show us are Managing Director David Wallace, board member and filmmaker Yoruba Richin, and contributing editor and photojournalist Joseph Rodriguez. So first, congratulations are due, I think, David, to you. I was at an early meeting, I don't know what year, from which emerged this project?
We're growing, and we're proud of what we do, which is fun journalism about inequality and the barriers to the American dream as we see it.
And what do you do exactly? How do you do that?
Well, it's challenging. What we do is twofold. On one hand, we work with low-income reporters or emerging reporters, filmmakers and photographers to fund journalism, and sometimes we'll do multiple drafts, sometimes we'll buy them a computer. I have one contributor who's unbanked, and I had to send him Target gift cards to pay him. So we do whatever is necessary to get stories about poverty by people who have experienced poverty into mainstream publications. We'll place the stories, and then on the other hand, we'll work with very established folks, including these two geniuses who are over here on my right, and we will provide them with funding to do stories and documentaries and photo essays. In places like the New York Times, we'll partner with them. We'll partner with Showtime. We won an Emmy Award last year for a project that we helped produce. And so we're busy putting out about 150 stories and placements in a year.
Well, congratulations again. I mean, Yoruba, you are now very established.
And a genius.
And a genius. That's true. We've got it now on tape. Talk a bit about how you came up, how this helped or didn't help, why you decided to be on the board, and just how needed this is. I mean, why is it significant that you have low-income people reporting on low-income people?
Well, it's really interesting just hearing the introduction and being reminded again how rare that is in our coverage. I think we're seeing a lot of that with all the political coverage, how the big deficit in the media around economic issues and around the intersectionality of economic issues. To me, that was one of the things that's most exciting about the Economic Hardship Reporting Project is that it's not just pulling out class as its own thing, because as we know, issues of gender, sexuality, race all intersect, and you cannot talk about those issues.
That's the problem with our bodies and our lived lives.
Exactly, and it's not identity politics as they want to call it. This is our lived lives. The work that I've worked on with the organization and that I've seen, it's all intersectionality. I feel like that's a base of the organization. Another thing that's really important, especially as a filmmaker, is that the grants that are given, in my case, just speaking very, from my own experience, the two grants that I've received from the organization were very early grants. And that's very hard to get, especially in documentary, when often people want to see something before funding you. But the project that we're working on now, American Reckoning, the early grant led to us being able to do one more shoot, edit a trailer, and then get fully funded for a short that we're doing and partnering with Retro Report. So it's a real key part of the organization and very important in terms of helping us make work.
So still going back to the landscape into which this project was born, what's the problem that the project is trying to address?
From my group of folks that I work with, the photojournalism group, especially the seasoned photojournalists. I have seen the greatest photographers just get laid off and kicked to the curb over the past 20 years. I worked for 30 years to learn how to really tell a very intimate and important story, like around criminal justice, or around race, or around migrations from Mexico. You know, if it was not for Economic Hardship Reporting Project, I would not be able to do these stories. Yeah. So they're helping me get the work done. And then I'm pretty good at making the media people, the big boys and big girls, feel guilty, so that they're not doing enough or they're not showing these stories enough. And so, you know, I go knocking on the doors of the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm working with them now. It's really important, the work, very quietly, what comes from the Economic Hardship Report.
You wanted to answer that question.
I just wanted to say a conversation that I had with a editor, a very prominent editor at a seemingly progressive publication. And she said to me, just flippantly, she said, anyone in this economy who wants a job can get a job. And my jaw dropped because it's just such a myth. And so about 1/3 of Americans, according to Pew, believe that poor people are in their current state because of lack of effort, rather than systemic issues. And so we try to look at that those underreported issues, that systemic problems.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the systemic nature of the situation that we're in and the question of intersectionality, I'm reminded that our media culture is itself a place of incredible segregation along all the lines that we've mentioned so far. And I remember in 2011, I think when we were thinking about how were we going to cover what some in the media were calling the recovery, it felt to me as if really no journalists had a human, personal connection to the reality most people were living where they were not feeling recovered at all. That culture problem, I think it's, 72% of journalists live in East Coast cities or coastal
Montclair,
cities?
New Jersey.
Is that part of the problem? We just don't know anybody, don't feel it?
Yeah, I think it is. You know, in some ways, I was just thinking, where we are having the reckoning of, in terms of race and gender, in terms of who tells what story, and there's an acknowledgement, at least the beginnings, that people of color need to tell their own stories, women need to tell their own stories. We've got a long way
Revolution,
to go.
21st
Exactly,
century.
yeah. But we haven't had that conversation around class and around working people. I mean, that hasn't been had, and the work that the organization is doing is exactly that. And I think that that's, you know, again, that's the problem of how things are covered in the mainstream media.
So let's show a couple of examples. We have a few examples of project-funded pieces. Do you want to introduce them? I'm thinking maybe the dashcam video piece.
Sure. Dashcam video was a project of The Intercept by Maisie Crow, who's an Emmy Award-winning director, Debbie Nathan, and I'm going to...
The ACLU?
No, it was, Debbie Nathan was at the ACLU at the time, but now she's an independent reporter. And it shows she managed to get a hold of the dashcam video from Texas police. And it's gripping because it shows you the moments where they pull over people for relatively minor traffic violations and then turn them over to ICE.
Hello. Take after. There's a side man. You have a defective tail light on the right side. Yes.
When I first started my job, I was hearing from a lot of people in the community about being stopped for just trivial traffic infractions and then being turned over by the Department of Public Safety, which is the state troopers, being turned over to the Border Patrol.
Is that your baby in the back?
Yes.
Is it a boy or girl?
She's a girl. She's
5 months. Is he the dad?
Yeah.
Does he have a visa?
Texas actually has a really good open records law, and so when I heard these stories, I thought to myself, I should just take down people's names and other information they give me, and I should ask for the dash cam.
I'm on a traffic stop. Can you send a Border Patrol agent over here?
We don't have to depend on the mere word of people anymore. We now have this documentary, audiovisual evidence.
Oh, they're gonna take it, sir. They're taking everyone.
Who said that?
Everybody's saying that they're taking everyone. They're deporting them.
When the dash cam started coming in, I realized, wow,
por favor.
This is really a record of a deportation machine, of state troopers fishing for people on the highways and then turning them into federal immigration officials.
Super powerful. It makes all the difference in the world to actually hear those voices. Another piece I wanted you to play is the piece about sleeping in your cars.
Yeah, it's Safe Parking by Jennifer Dworkin. It ran on The Nation, and it's very intimate portraits of three families who are living in their cars. It's very moving, these personal stories. Really, we think, cut through the noise. And hopefully, my colleague, Alyssa Quart, she says, empathy is our metric, and we hope that this creates a lot of empathy.
I left because my ex and my son got into a physical fight. I left the house with all my kids. I went to a hotel for a while, a friend's house for a while, then another friend's house for another 3 months, and then another friend's house for another 3 months.
There's a Santa Barbara ordinance saying that it's illegal to sleep in your vehicle overnight. We have 20 lots throughout the Santa Barbara area over here. So when you pull in, there's like a parking lot here and here. It's this back one. You can start entering anytime after 8 p.m. and then you have to be out by 7 a.m. every morning.
I make the money, I just don't have good credit. My oldest son, he helps me by watching them while I work at night. So there's been times that they'll be sleeping in the car while I'm at my night job, that the cops come and knock on the window. And they've asked them what are they doing there, and they tell them, well, we're waiting for mom to get off in 15 minutes. We know it's going to be 2 more hours.
Never come. Life is not promised. Tomorrow may never show up. Never show up. Life is not promised. Ooh yeah. When I say I got your back, oh yeah, you know that's my promise. I will never leave you. Only love is real. The door is open, and I'll never turn my back. No. Oh yeah. Want to see love, be loved. Oh yeah.
Part of me wants to just say, rah, rah, I'm so glad this is getting out. Another part of me wants to say, why does it need a nonprofit organization to raise the funds to tell these stories that are the stories of our time, and without which we're not going to make smart decisions as a nation?
I mean, this is the power of alternative journalism, right? That's what we do. I mean, I worked at ABC News, and we know the problems there, that it's who runs these corporations, the narrative that they latch and hold on to and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. Thank goodness for these organizations, shows like this, to get this other narrative out there. If we could answer that question,
right.
we could have a whole different country.
Glad and super sort of mad.
Yeah.
I jokingly say, half jokingly, I say, my job is to put Band-Aids on gushing wounds. That's what we do. We try to make a modicum of change. But 1,400 newspapers have gone out of business in the last 15 years, I believe. And
mostly because their owners wanted to make a 30% return on their investment in that local paper.
That's part of it. That's
not
right.
because there's no market, I just want to say.
Just the other day, the Vindicator, which is an age-old newspaper in Youngstown, Ohio, announced that they're closing. Now, that's a city with 63,000 people, okay? And Patch, I'm sorry, is not going to be able to cover the mayor's office.
The online local news service.
No, you're not going to have. There's a value in an experienced reporter being holding people to account.
And the other thing too, just on that note, looking at local television, right? We're also seeing a conglomeration of these big corporations buying up local television stations like a Sinclair Broadcasting, which has a conservative bent, which is a outwardly political bent, telling reporters what to report on, opinion pieces that meet their political goals.
Actually, we need more billionaires to snap up newspapers before it's too late, I would argue, the progressive ones.
I think we need more media in the public interest, in the public domain, and we need more fights about public-owned media. But that's a whole other subject. Having made our points and expressed our fury, and I could keep doing that, I also want to really talk about what you two, especially as journalists, are bringing to these stories that wouldn't be there otherwise. And I want to use your example, Joseph, of some of the pieces that you've brought, mostly to the New York Times. Photojournalism, again, critical topics, that a story that you tell very differently. Introduce the Gangs of LA piece, where you put those folks back in their communities.
Right. Well, I thank you, Laura, for that question, but I have to step back here because I grew up in New York City, and I grew up at a time when we had the West Side Story atmosphere of Italians here, Puerto Ricans here. So race was something I grew up with. I heard about all the banter about how I should go back. So as a youngster, I always felt, reading the Daily News, the New York Post, every Sunday, I think it was Sunday, you'd see the crime pages. Who got thrown off the roof in Spanish Harlem with this? And I took it upon myself when I was a student at IC, at the International Center of Photography, to look at my own community, Spanish Harlem. What? With 150 churches in 2.5 square miles. People didn't know that. And I started working on that project. This is important for in context, where I am and who I am and what I do. Because I went to National Geographic and I said to them, hey, would you be interested in looking at us? Now, they have a tendency to slant their stories in a very colonial style. So I went along with it. We did the story for them. It became a big story. They fired the editor because Grosvenor felt they should not, this is a fact, should not be doing stories about families, poor families in East Harlem. However, we can go to Africa and shoot it. We can do this. We can do that. So I did the story. I went to the Smithsonian Museum and National Museum of American Art and said, hey, I don't see us being recognized here, because in 1987, I was telling editors in New York and around the country that the growth of Hispanic America is here. It's growing. We are here. So again, I'm pretty good at sort of nudging the guilt card. So we got this first book published called Growing Up in Spanish Harlem. And then that sort of was the platform for me to understand. It's 5 years of work of spending in a community where we got to get to know families, see families every week. Because as an ex-addict, I know what it's like to redeem oneself. I know what it's like to go to Rikers Island, where I spent two little nice little vacation times in there. I like to call it that because it wasn't a vacation, and that also set the tone for me to go to Los Angeles. So in 1992, the riots happened, the Rodney King scene happened, and I decided to go out there on my own. I got a grant from the Fund for Investigative Journalism. That's how it started. Yeah, and then I got another grant from the Mother Jones Foundation, who gave us another grant. And then I spent 4 weeks there, decided to move there in 92, stayed there for 2 more years. This brings us up to the present, where I meet the folks at Economic Hardship, and I say, hey, it would be interesting to let's take a look and see what these guys look like and the families look like in today. So 20 something years later, we go back, we find Steve Blunt, the families, and all, and you find out they're not gangsters anymore. They're not drug addicts anymore. They're grandfathers now. This is what it's all about, what we've been talking about from the very beginning, about owning our own story, telling it from an insider's point of view, and spending time with families. And now we're putting the pictures up on Instagram so the kids and the grandkids can learn about their history.
So just to put a fine point on it, for people that might have missed it, your point is to tell a story that didn't stop with the worst moment in those people's lives.
Exactly. Because that's the American story, Laura. We all of us can start at the bottom. And you know, these people that say, yes, you can make it, you can make it. I grew up with affirmative action. That's why I'm standing here. You know, so I mean, things really did change my life because of that time, right here in Brooklyn and New York. So I know what can change. And then when it comes to journalism, this is a very important point. Editors after editor after editor would ask me, where's the blood? Where's the drugs? Where's the guns? Where's the AIDS? Where's this? And I would say to them constantly, okay, I can give you that. But we need to show the other side to give us a balance in America so we're not just one-sided slanted.
You did a piece that also added a new take to a story, a very familiar story around abortion rights. We're given the story of for and against, and we usually in the media like to talk about the fights. You did something very different for a piece that I think ended up being called Reconception.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce that and we'll take a look
Sure.
at it?
And that's actually how I got introduced to the project, because Alyssa Court, the co-founder, had written a piece about looking at reproductive rights, looking at abortion as part of the spectrum of healthcare that women receive. And she had written an article about it that I found very moving and resonated with my own family, of women who, you know, had an abortion, given up kids for adoption, and been pregnant and had children.
The whole gamut.
The whole gamut. And so many women have that experience. So Alyssa and I connected around that, and I thought it would be a great, you know, short video piece if we could demonstrate this, show this. And we found a center in Indiana called All Options that was a resource center for women around the full spectrum healthcare, women's reproductive healthcare.
When I was 20, I experienced an unintended pregnancy. It was the hardest time of my life. I had no idea what was the right decision. I didn't have access to counseling services. I chose adoption. I felt pretty lost.
All Options Pregnancy Resource Center is the first of its kind. We do peer counseling, we refer for abortion, and so the full spectrum approach, or the all options approach, is a powerful way of reconceptualizing access to services and safe and respectful care.
Being here today is really meaningful for me. My adoption experience is the one I'm most vocal about, but I have also, during a second unintended pregnancy, experienced a miscarriage a week or so before I had scheduled an abortion. And I only mention that just because reproductive experiences don't necessarily fit the linear ideology of mainstream society. And All Options is unique because it recognizes and validates this full spectrum of experiences. It's not about abortion's wrong. It's not about abortion is right. We can no longer see it as a pro-choice, pro-life. It needs to be women's lives. It's about what's right for the woman.
We often say on this program, we end by asking people, you know, what's the story you think the future will tell of this moment? And you're all storytellers. And I guess I would adapt the question slightly to say, what would be the story the future would tell of America if your stories got told now as not a special project or now and then, but the news, which would assume that we had people to carry the news, but just addressing the nature of the story.
The robust economy isn't all that robust. Yeah. that it's quite thin. The number of people who are struggling today is enormous, and they're struggling not because of lack of effort, but they're struggling because of systemic issues that this country is set up to hold us back rather than give us a leg up.
I think for me, it would be the fundamental brokenness of our democracy and in how we elect our leaders through an electoral college system that's not representative, and a gerrymandering process that has kept voices out of the system and is part of the reason why we have kept these structures which are not helping the majority of Americans.
You get the last word.
As a humanist, I care about telling stories about us that struggle and that may have a hard time, but that there is a chance for us to tell it more in a fuller, honest way and not necessarily always put us in this negative spot that we will not change.
Do you have words of encouragement for journalists or people who might think they want to be journalists, or the kid on the block that's telling stories to his neighbors or hers?
I mean, I just think about what your heart is telling you and think about what your mind is telling you. And then maybe shop less. Read more.
It's the best profession in the world because you get to learn every day. It's still something that, even though it's a struggle to survive, it's the greatest thing you can do, in my opinion.
And it's deeply, deeply satisfying. Even, the economic rewards may not always be there. I feel privileged to be able to tell these stories, that people let me into their lives, give me access. And there's nothing like it if you feel like you want to say something and maybe change something.
It is quite amazing when you see that, because we just recently had a big exhibition at Photoville in Los Angeles, and families that I photographed in the 90s all came with their children and cried and just, we've changed, Joe, we've changed. I'm dealing with people right now that I photographed back then that are still in their own 12-step environment, and as an ex-addict, that is a beautiful thing for me to discuss that journey with their children, with their families, and thanks to Economic Hardship Reporting Project, we can do stories like this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your work, and I agree. Best job in the world. Glad we can all do it.
Thank you.